Hi, my name is Brian Thomas, and I want to do a teaching demo on factoring trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, where a cannot equal 1. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to slide this in under 15 minutes. So let's do a little bit of a setup for us. Some vocabulary, some things we've already done. We talked about factoring. We talked about coefficients, and especially the leading coefficient, the binomial, the trinomial. We mentioned what factors are and the greatest common factor, how to define the greatest common factor. And of course, we have spent much on talking about special terms, that quadratic term, that linear term, and that constant. So we did that. And then we've done a little bit of factoring already of some problems where the coefficient was not equal to 1. But we used what was called the four-square method, and also we used what was called big T. So in the previous lessons, we also did factoring of trinomials where we used actually four-square and big T. So how that worked is four-square, of course, we just make a box there, four-square box. And big T, of course, is just a T-chart. And as we said, what the box or four-square does, it really allows me to factor this 3x squared plus 17x plus 10. It gives me an organization. So we learned that the quadratic term drops down into the top left. The 10 drops down to the bottom right. But the catch is, where did the 17 comes from? And that's where the big T comes into play here. So big T, to get this 30 though, what's important is we have to multiply this leading coefficient to the 10. Because before we didn't have the coefficient, but now 3 times 10 creates this magic number of 30. We're going to use the factors of 30 to develop this coefficient of the middle term, that's 17. So we did the factors of 30, and we saw that this 2 and 5 were very good because that 2 and 5 gave us this 17. So that allowed us to build this 2x and this 15x. And so this trinomial turned into a 4-term expression inside four-square. And then the next catch was we had to use this GCF. In the GCF, we looked at these first 2 terms and we saw that this x came out. And then we started figuring out, well, what gave us this 3x squared plus 2x? And we knew that x times 3x gave us our 3x squared. X times 2 gave us this 2x. So we're starting to work on these outer edges with four-square. And then notice that 5 times the 3x gave us our 15x. So we discovered that 5 had to match that. And 5 times 2 gave us our 10. So our outside now matches our inside. The inside is all multiplied out to be the trinomial, but the outside actually represents the binomials that gave us that trinomial. So the 3x plus 2 became our first binomial, and the x plus 5 became our second binomial. And hence, we now have the trinomial factored. So what are we going to do today in our lesson? Well, we want to factor by grouping. From my experience, a lot of our students, you're going to go up to take something beyond college algebra as well, possibly. And so we need to be prepared to know how to do some of the math up those next levels. So without further ado, we're going to try to do a little bit of factoring by grouping. So see if we can get that to work. No more four-square. Let's see if I can get my screen to share. Oh, good. I think we're good to go here. So I went on and made the steps of factoring by grouping. So again, it's not a bad idea to pause the video. And if you want to go ahead and list those steps down and be ready to do the examples, that'd be a good idea. I will not pause. I'm going to continue on. So what we want to do now is start with our first example. 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. So how do we go about doing this? Well, it's very similar to four-square. It just gets laid out a little bit differently. And that's kind of the art of math, is how do we lay it out on paper? So the first step is multiply the leading coefficient and the constant. So that's where we come into play with this 2 and this 5. So 2 times this 5 is going to give me then my 10. So what do we do with that 10? Well, this is where big T comes into play. So we're going to use big T, and we're going to put that 10 above there. So remember, we're going to have to do the factors of the 10, but we have to add to get this middle coefficient of 11. So step 2, we got the big T, but we got to determine the factors that will add to equal the coefficient of the middle term. So we need this 10 and this 11. So again, this is a good place to pause your video and I will continue on. So the factors of 10 would be 1 and 10, 2 and 5, 3 is not going to work, 4, no, 5 times 2, yeah. And since we're repeating, we know that's our stopping point. So the next step, of course, is we have to figure out which of these is going to give me my 11. That 1 and 10 look very good. So we're going to use those guys, that 1 and 10. So from here, we move into steps 3. We want to rewrite the trinomial with a 4 term, and we want to box 2 by 2. So this is going to look a whole lot like 4 squared. So we keep the 2x squared, but we're going to change the 11x into its 2 middle terms. So we have a 1x, remember, just x though. We have our 10x, and we have our 5 comes back into the problem. It really doesn't matter where these two go, but I really like where the 10 is lined up with this 5. It makes it look pretty good. So we now need a box 2 by 2. So I'll go ahead and draw a box around the first 2. But when I draw a box around the second 2, I include the addition symbol with that to kind of makes it look a little bit better for me. And so now we're ready to move into step 4, factor the GCF for each box. So I'm looking at this box here and I see there is a GCF of x. It comes out and we have 2x. And we need that 1 there because we can't leave it empty. So 2x squared and 1x, or just x. We then look at our second box and we see that there is a GCF of 5. So we pull out a positive 5, so we put a plus 5 there in that situation. Helps us with our signs. 5 times 10 would be then our 2x. Or 5 times 2x would give us our 10x. And 5 times what would give me 5 would be, again, we need a 1 there. So that checks out, 5 times 2x. So we're factoring a little bit there. And then we want to factor the greatest common factor, which now is going to be a binomial. So we're looking at these two pieces here, and we see that there's a 2x plus 1 here and a 2x plus 1 there. So we do have some binomials that are in common. So what we do is we pull the 2x plus 1 out. And we use parentheses here because we're on the home stretch now, because we want to multiply a binomial times a binomial. So the parentheses are going to be used here. And since the 2x plus 1 came out in front, all we're left with is x plus 5. Okay. And so that completes our factorization of the trinomial. And it's always a good idea to multiply that back out using FOIL to see if it actually verifies. I'm going to leave that step for you at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to one more example of factoring by grouping. So again, step 1, we have 2x squared plus 3x minus 9, and we want to multiply the leading coefficient to the constant. So that gives us our negative 18, and we want to make big T with that. A nice T chart. But remember, we have to multiply and add here. So we need to find our factors of negative 18, but we have to add to get this 3. So the negative 18, but we need to get this middle coefficient of 3 there. So again, this is a good place to pause your video and start doing some factoring. So the factors of 18 to start with, 1 and 18. I'm going to leave the negative out for the time being, just focus on the factors of 18. 2 and 9. 3 and 6. 4, I don't see. 5, I don't see either. 6 and 3. But now we're repeating, that tells us our factorization is done there. But notice how we need a negative 18. That means one of them has to be negative. What helps us figure that out is the actual coefficients of 3. Remember, we have to add these to get the 3. And since that's a positive 3, the bigger number's got to be positive. That means the smaller numbers have to be negative here. Now we're trying to figure out which of these add to give me this 3. So we're seeing this negative 3 and a 6. come together to give me this 3. So we're now done with step 2. We found our numbers that make the middle term. So moving into step number 3, we're now going to rewrite this trinomial with the four terms, and we're going to, I need a little S, with 4 terms, and we want to box 2 by 2. So again, the quadratic term stays the same, 2x squared, but the middle term gets broken apart. It's always a good idea to keep the subtraction sign first if you can, and we can. And then the plus 6x slides in. That makes the math a little bit easier. And we'll do, if we do more examples, you would see why that works a little bit better. And then we have a minus 9 here. So I got it rewritten as 4 terms. Now we do the box spot 2 by 2. So let's box that 2 by 2. Now we're done with step 3. Step 4, we now start to do some GCF for each box. So look at this box. We're seeing an x in common. That gives us a 2x minus 3. And then over here, we see a positive 3. So I'll put a plus 3 out here. And that gives me a 2x minus 3 as well. And that looks correct. You can always run this back through and it should get you back to what we have above. Because we're just, all we're doing is undoing everything, working backwards. So now we're looking for the GCF binomial. So we see that this 2x minus 3 and this 2x minus 3 are alike. We got a winner there. We have a common factor. So we pull out the 2x minus 3. And that's going to leave us then with this x plus 3. And remember, since we're on our last step, we're multiplying a binomial by a binomial, and we need those parentheses there to kind of show multiplication. And again, it's always a good idea to multiply that out to see if it gets you back to what we started with. So that kind of completes our process of factoring by grouping. So, thank you for your time today. And guys, we'll be sending you some homework as well. For those in class, feel free to text me Big T to kind of verify that you watched the video. And I'll be having a prize for you next class. Also, if you want to go to One Take Math, I'll have some more videos for you to watch on factoring by grouping, since we only did a couple here. So have an extended time for you there. So that completes it. You all have a nice day.